Hello, and welcome back to the AI Ethics Now podcast. My name is Dr. Tom Ritchie. Really excited to be joined today by Pavan Konanur. Hi, Pavan.
Hey, how are you, Tom?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, not too bad at all.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. I wanted to ask if you could tell us a little bit more about your current role and what you do and your interest in the topic of AI.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I have a primary role and then a secondary role that I've been doing kind of for the last several years. My primary role now is I'm a co-founder of a AI education startup called Hoja AI. And so basically, we are working with AI and trying to create a one-to-one personalized learning platform that can use AI to give better education to people that are trying to learn stuff. In my other kind of hat, I've been teaching and lecturing at Ada College, it's an apprenticeship college, not for profit. And I've been doing that for the last several years. And actually, the funny part of where my worlds have collided is I've been kind of working in tech and lecturing. And what I lecture on is predominantly innovation and things like that, entrepreneurship, and I do modules on AI and all these types of things, and then I actually just got way more interested and saw a lot of opportunities for using AI, both in the tech world, but then trying to do it in education, and so that's where I've come to.
Thank you so much. I think that's a really interesting place to be. And the fact that you're on both sides of teaching this and working in your startup, it must give you a really interesting kind of overview of the questions that people are asking in the classroom as well, that you're able to take back to the startup to be able to interrogate, I guess, a little bit further.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, right, to have been teaching and lecturing about the topic at a very high level, obviously, and I don't teach at a technical detailed level, but you talk a lot about the concepts and the philosophies and the applications, and sometimes they sound easy, sometimes they sound difficult, and then you go try and build something, and even the easiest thing is difficult. But yes, and what people say and what people ask, and then when you try to put it into practice, it's really fascinating, the full circle from learning and academia to then the application of building something to then going back to users or consumers or customers, and really getting everyone's inputs.
I think, particularly in the context of innovation, it sounds really interesting when you think about the application of AI to, say, the ideation process. If we think about design thinking and the possibilities that it has to help support creativity. I'm very conscious of saying AI is creative because we know that there are challenges with that, but this a way of almost doing some of the ideation creativity for you, so then you can apply um, some of that perhaps higher order thinking, I guess, to different products and to different ideas. So yeah, that sounds like a really interesting place to be. Could you explain AI in simple terms for our listeners, please?
Yeah, for sure. I'll do that in a second. And I just was gonna go back to what you were saying before that on design thinking and using AI and whatnot. Yeah, I couldn't agree more that I think or maybe I would say it a little differently, is like AI is a sparring partner, a friend, like a tutor, right? And that's kind of where we're going with what we're doing. But it helps that process. There's been countless times in my life where I've been trying to do something creative, innovative, whatever the case is, but it's hard to start or hard to figure it out. And now it seems like I have avenues which I didn't before that are really helpful, right? Which is amazing, and it's not something to just outsource or throw away, but it's something to make people better, in my opinion. But obviously, I guess we'll talk about a lot of this over the next several minutes, but like, yeah, there's pros and cons to some of this as well. But to your question, can I explain AI in some, maybe simple terms? I think I can only explain it in simple terms. I'll leave the technical explanations to people like my co-founders who are far brighter than me. The way I look at it is artificial intelligence, or obviously as everyone calls it, AI, is effectively like teaching a computer to think and make decisions similar to how humans do. It's about creating software that can solve problems, recognize patterns or make predictions. And I think with AI, there's also this component of learning from data and learning from something. Imagine if it's a robot that can recognize your face, or a program that can recommend new music or movies, things that we kind of know. These are examples of AI at work, right? Which some of us might just be like, yeah, that's so obvious, and some of us be like, oh, I didn't really understand that. But sometimes when you take a step back, I think we kind of get what AI is in many ways, but maybe not the deeper sense of it.
Yeah, and I think there are so many aspects of AI that are kind of already in our lives. You mentioned about recommendations of, say, films or music. And I think sometimes the way that we think about AI, it can be in these kind of grandiose terms of super intelligence, or, a world controlled by AI in the future, when actually AI has a perhaps much more fundamental role in helping us with more of those day-to-day tasks, more of those repetitive tasks, perhaps is the way to think about it, where yes, we can do that, but is that the best use of our time? And if AI can eliminate some of those more mundane activities, it allows you as a human to uh, almost bring your what makes you human. And this is why it's such an interesting debate, I think, around artificial intelligence and human intelligence, because to understand artificial intelligence, we almost have to understand what is it that makes us human, what makes us different from the machine, and then how do we apply that to create better outcomes.
Yeah, yeah, it's a fascinating point, right? Like the extremes of AI and the topic. You can go in so many different ways here. And again, I think you touch on this point of like using it as something that helps, or how it differentiates between humans and whatnot. And AI, I think it's a complex area when you go past the surface area, but yeah, I think when I look at AI, and I always kind of give the example here. Like I worked at Amazon for a few years, way back when, and they were doing a lot in terms of recommendations, and we've all been on Amazon and seen the recommendations. We've all been on Netflix or Amazon Prime, and I worked on a few of those services, and it was just fascinating, right? And the point was to make it better for the consumer, to give them stuff that they couldn't necessarily maybe get to themselves, or surface something for them based on their data, their patterns, whatever the case is, and really using some forms of working with their data or people similar to them to give these recommendations, right? And actually, if I expand on that example a little bit, the goal, I think, when I was at Amazon, at least what I thought was to try and use these machines to make our jobs better, the output for customers better, and that was a bit strange at the time. And they had this term of like hands off the wheel, where you were basically trying to almost mimic this like automated driving concept, but internally to tools and processes. And ultimately, I think everyone's so used to it now, but back like 10 years ago, it was a bit strange, both as an employee, but also if you think about the consumer's perspective of it. Now I think everyone's just like, yeah, I prefer this. Like, what song are you going to recommend next to me on Spotify, right? Why haven't you told me what to do next? But yeah, it's been interesting how it goes.
And what an amazing experience for you to have almost been there as that was developing. I think your last point about almost how we're using AI to begin to program us in a way where it's giving you that next recommendation, that next song. But then that raises a huge number of questions that I'm sure we can get into around some perhaps of the ethics of this, because we've been talking a little bit about the black box of AI, about what actually happens inside there. I think we've also been touching on something that we already see to an extent on social media, which is this challenge sometimes of echo chambers, where if you're always being recommended what an algorithm is saying, you might never go and find the things outside of that. You only ever may listen to the same 50 songs, but in kind of various different compositions, because it keeps giving you the same set. And there are some real challenges with that I think as a society we are beginning to talk about more, and perhaps is something, particularly for the students listening, to think about the ramifications that come with that of when we think about AI, we need to think about training data, and then where's that data coming from, and whose voices perhaps are missing from training data. There's so many, literally, just with this discussion, there's so many different threads we could pull on to go down.
Yeah, yeah, totally, and I think, yeah, it touches on so many different things, and I mean, I think it's the safe example to talk about music and movies, but you take it to news and what our feeds are full of. Take it into like voting and elections, which were just passed and coming into, depending what part of the world you're in. And then you start to become, oh wow, like this is complicated, and these echo chambers, and what can happen, let alone if you start to go deeper into AI, and you touched about like this big, complex, grandiose what's AI, like the whole, this whole concept of can you break AI down into narrow AI or like general AI, right? And are we going to get to artificial general intelligence and all of these concepts where you're starting to go, wow, this is mind blowing, right? To what we see on a day-to-day basis now, which is pretty mainstream, which is generative AI and just stuff getting reproduced for us. But you take this generative AI and we go back to the news example, and well, what is news anymore, or where did that article come from? How much of it is reproduced? How much of it is real? Doesn't matter, right? And but again, there are some real world implications, not only from what song am I going to listen to, and can I listen to new songs or not, because I might be stuck in a loop, or who am I going to vote for, right? And so that becomes a bit challenging, I think, and you probably where the ethics debate starts to get even more intense. And another part of the ethics debate, I think, comes in where I was talking about things earlier about jobs and how people's jobs change and or even get replaced and things like this.
We could also then talk about energy consumption and actually how much energy these things are beginning to require just to keep them working. And then on top of that, you also have a lot of questions about, and I've kind of alluded to it, but where's the data coming from? And the historian in me sits there and says, well, actually, the majority of history in the world is not written down. The majority of it's oral tradition. How are we capturing that in AI? Are we are we capturing it? Do we need to give it that consideration? And actually, these are huge questions that we're going to have to consider and grapple with for probably years to come.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I think you've opened my eyes to something that I would have never even thought about as well, which is the concept of the what's not written down and what's from ages ago, which is true, right? Because that's probably not captured in the traditional sense of how you train an AI algorithm, and probably something that people aren't particularly in a hurry to kind of catch up with, right? Or it's gotten to this place without it. Why, is it helpful? Is it not? Or what will it do, right? When we capture that data, put it down, and then train a model.
Exactly, and I think one of the big challenges is knowing where to stop with the threads, because we can spend 10 weeks debating these topics without really even getting into the detail of them. I wonder, with that in mind, then, if you'd be happy to talk a little bit more about how AI algorithms learn and improve over time.
Yeah, yeah, good question. I think AI algorithms, from what we've already talked about, we kind of get this concept of data is being important. So AI algorithms learn from data. Effectively, kind of how we learn from data, experiences, and things like that. So the more data that an algorithm process, the better they become at making decisions. So, for example, if you show an AI thousands of pictures of cats and dogs, it can learn to tell the difference between them. Again, over time, it gets to learn more and see the difference, and it can be trained, right? And as it sees more examples, it gets better and better, and can tell you which one's the cat, which one's the dog, which type. And the process, as I was alluding to, is called training, and it involves adjusting the AI's internal rule to improve accuracy, right? And this is a particular branch of AI that we talk about in that example, but for all intents and purposes, it's the same kind of concept across the board.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting introduction to some of the ways in which AI is trained. Let's step back. A different question. We as humans make decisions based on incomplete data. But so many of the debates around training AI are people discussing we need to have more and more complete data. And it makes you wonder, where is the point in which where do we feel comfortable with the amount of data that an AI can have to make a decision or to give a recommendation? And is that a fixed point for every issue? Or
Yeah, I think yeah, I think it's tricky, right? Like how much should the AI be trained? Who gets to tell someone how much it should be trained? When is it good? When is it bad? Right? I tend to always, where my head goes with this stuff is like the AI or the algorithm. Obviously a machine, but like the way you're training them is kind of how you train a human to do something. And when can you say the human has done it enough, or is correct, or is good enough? And I guess there's tests you could do, there's ways to measure, but ultimately someone's there dictating that, hey, this model has been trained enough, and thus it can go out in the world. And you have to assume that whoever that is has done their diligence and trained the person correctly. And again, not a person in this case, an algorithm. A bit of a challenging topic to get your heads around and really know where to draw the line, I think.
and I think that lack of clarity is perhaps what makes this discussion interesting, because it's up to every person in their context to decide where is that line. And I think for most of our students, they'll be in diverse disciplines and they'll be working in those fields now and in the future. And it's about deciding critically, okay, how much of this tool am I going to use in my role that's related to chemistry, and actually to be able to usefully contemplate where are the lines within which we're going to use AI here. Because ChatGPT, things when it became popular, I was very conscious about, when asking a question, putting please on the end, which has no benefit for the computer in that moment at all, absolutely none. But there is that part, as you say, of wanting to be polite and wanting to. It's been described somewhere by someone else I've spoken to as like prompt craft, the ability to craft prompts that get you what you want, but almost have a humanistic element, that you're not just treating AI like a machine. I'll be really interested, and please say if you don't want to speak about it, but I'd be really interested to learn a little bit more about the app actually that you're developing, because a lot of these questions will be considered in that. If you'd like to talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, of course. What we're creating, again, it's called Hoja, and it's Hoja.ai. Anyone can take a look. And basically, I'll actually start with kind of the problem we're trying to tackle, and where the genesis of this came from. And it kind of touches a little bit about what you were talking about earlier on, like, people from different disciplines, they have different ways of maybe using AI or learning. And the same premise kind of came to me, and probably many people, both on the side of being a learner or an academic and teaching. Everyone learns very differently. And I don't know about you, but from when I teach, it's almost impossible to do anything other than generic slides or generic lessons, because there's too many students and one of me. And but when I'm able to, and when I'm able to really connect with people, it's when I'm able to share personal stories, but personal stories that connect with the person. And if I could, I go around to 30 different students in a classroom, and adapt my content just to each person, because one person likes, basketball, and one person likes knitting, and another person speaks a different language. And so you're like, okay, cool, I'll adjust. I can't do that. It's not, literally not humanly possible for me to do that. It's exhausting. It's time consuming. I probably don't have the skill set. Now with AI, or even generative AI, let alone all the other facets, I'm able to do that a lot easier. And so that's kind of where the concept came from. And it was just like, hey, in my other jobs, I was a marketer for years, and would personalize advertisement, and you'd really get these really clever things you could say to people, like exactly what they would want to see, or maybe not, but you would still get to them. And anyway, so we tried to take this concept and say, okay, can we personalize learning, right? And use AI, and use generative AI, and get a chat and tutor experience that's more personal, always there for you, fraction of the cost, and then keep going from there. Personalized lessons, personalized content in the lessons, and it goes from interest based to how you're working and interacting with the platform. But the basic premise of it is like one-to-one learning that's personalized to you. And I can imagine a digital AI tutor, but it's also personalizing all the learning.
I think so many of the discussions around the uses of AI, we tend to go down the negative route, but actually what you're describing with Hoja AI sounds so positive and it sounds so necessary. And I was nodding along to your point about you can't tailor your teaching style to 30 people in the room because you cannot do that. You'd be there for weeks and no one would learn anything and you'd just leave a broken mess. That's pretty much where you'd be if you tried to do that. But I think it sounds like a really interesting platform for people to be able to use. And I'll put it up so that students can have a look at it as well, because we're talking a lot about uses of AI in relation to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, of which is to do with education and things like that. So you can see where platforms like what you're describing will have a really interesting place. What do you think are the main ethical considerations that we need to have when training these types of AI models?
So yeah, ethical considerations is something that we think about a lot when training AI. I think it's important to look at fairness, privacy, accountability. As we've talked about, AI models learn from data, and if the data is biased, right? For instance, includes stereotypes or unfair assumptions, or just even depending on who published the data or where it came from, right? This then can really throw off what you get as outputs. And again, if we just think about generative AI, which is just a subset of AI, it's where a lot of us, I think, are using and learning and working with AI these days. It really depends on all of these things, that data set, but equally, like also what are the parameters put around the data set? Who developed the program? Who developed the tool? What did they think about, right? And I think it's really difficult because right now we see with these ethical considerations, even as like someone maybe in the middle trying to work with AI and work with tools, there is this bit of a black box, as I think you've alluded to, and so to the degree that you can try and explore and learn more, at some point also, I think a bit of this is outside of your hands as well. But yeah, I think just to recap: fairness, privacy, accountability, and then from the other side of it, just even creating software tools or using it, I think it's your diligence as a person, as a creator, as a student, to try and figure out as much as you can where the data is coming from. Maybe not where it's coming from, but what are the responses you're going to get before you cut, paste, and put it on a project, which I don't think none of us recommend that. Just be comfortable with where it's coming from, read it, interrogate it, go back and forth, because I think that's where you can get much better output before you just put something that might be wrong or unfair or inaccurate.
Yeah, particularly I think in relation to what we hear a lot about around AI hallucinations and the ability to create entire sources and entire arguments and concepts almost out of thin air because it understands what facts look like, but it doesn't understand the facts. And so if it can get something that looks like a fact, it will present it as such. I really like your point about fairness, privacy, and accountability. I would say that's a really good starting point for those listening when considering the ethics that come with using AI. And it also then leads itself to a bigger question that perhaps we talk about here, perhaps not, but and you also said it as well with who's almost programming this. And if we think about AI platforms at the moment, you have your big Google platforms, OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, and so on. And it's about almost understanding what type of AI are they trying to create, and is there a way of effectively auditing the way in which they create their AI, and actually to allow you to understand that, okay, ethically, it's one platform is very, very good in this space, but perhaps is slightly more challenged in this space. And it comes back to this concept that perhaps we are coming to within the world of AI is more around the governance of it. Who's deciding, who are putting the rules in place, and then almost who's watching the people who are deciding, who watches the watchers to make sure that they're quote unquote doing the right thing when it comes to AI. Because I think so much of so much of these discussions is couched within existing AI models when perhaps we don't even entirely understand how they're programmed, why they're programmed the way they are, and it's a big thing to consider. There are no easy answers with that.
Yeah, totally, and I think that the that last point I was making about accountability is probably like one of the bigger ones, right? To what you're saying, I mean, I think that's where I summarize it as well. It's who is accountable? How are they getting the data? What are they doing with it? What how do we make sure that someone's accountable and sharing, right? What's in the model, in the machine, just maybe make it easier for us to decipher and understand to the degree that you can with something so complex. So it's not, again, so simple, but I think that's where a lot of people seem to have questions. And now I think from the seat that I'm in, I work with students who fully embrace the technology. I work with academics who, I think are very skeptical or possibly just, wanting to make sure it's the right thing. And then same thing, right? In in life and in business, like some people want to do it, some people don't, and but I think the thing that people who are skeptical want is to understand how it works, or where is it coming from, where is it going. But the point on having someone be watched and a watcher and all this, I definitely agree, and governance is a big topic. But where do you start and who should do it, right? Again, all for governance, but it's not obviously that simple, and it doesn't necessarily mean it should be a government doing it.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think the European Union are trying to do some work around this, but you're entirely correct around who does this. Where does it happen? When does it happen? Are we at the right stage yet? And so many other challenges besides. So I wonder if we to kind of bring the podcast to an end. Just one last question for you, really, is um, what do you see as the most important steps that we can take to ensure a positive future with AI?
Yeah, I have some thoughts on this, and I'll kind of jump into that in a second. Before I do that, I wanted to share a quick story, really. I've alluded to the fact that I've been teaching for the last several years, and also, teaching entrepreneurship, but also dabbling with it myself. But as you'll know very well, one of the ways that many people look at entrepreneurship and innovation is to start with a problem, right? And look at problems, and then find solutions. And solutions are business ideas, and go with that, right? And I would always lead my students to go look for problems, and many different places and many different sources. But one of the places I would lead them was kind of a think tank, or something along those lines. And it would talk about what are the pressing problems in the world, right? And if I was to ask most people for the last several years, what are the most pressing problems in the world? Like, I mean, at least I know for me, I would have said, number one, environment, right? And that's just my point of view. Maybe it's pandemics, maybe it's war, maybe it's numerous other things, but that's where I would have kind of naturally gone. And so, anyways, the first time I pointed out this top problem in the world, it was something Oxford related, a think tank. I was just like reading it, and it was AI was the top problem that they could foresee, and an environment maybe second, and all these other things very close on that top list. And I was just like, I don't get it, right? And like, how is AI the top problem? And I think only now, as I start to see it and dive into it, it's just the acceleration and the speed in which a problem can happen. And we've talked about the positive and the negative so far. And without governance and without these things in place, it can get really scary really fast, right? And so when you ask the question, what are the most important steps we can take to ensure a positive future with AI, I think it's a really big and important question. The way I look at it is three things, really: education, regulation, and collaboration. So first, educating people about AI will help everyone understand the potentials and its challenges, where it's coming from, what it's doing. So we are more kind of in charge to the degree we can be. I think the second point on creating regulations and guidelines, it can ensure that AI is developed and used responsibly, both for the user and the creator. And again, who does it? Different story. And then lastly, collaboration, I guess, kind of touches on this. It can't just be governments, it can't just be businesses. It has to be kind of a collaborative effort, government, business, communities, local interest groups. Everyone has to participate, both to give a voice, to not have bias, to participate in this positive world, this positive future. Because I think AI is already there. It's already such a big part of our day to day.
I think that's such a great answer. I think it's really clear, and I really like the breakdown between education, regulation, and collaboration. Thank you so much, Pavan. Look forward to speaking to you again in future. Have a lovely rest of the day. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me.